All right, so far we discussed a couple of topics regarding the introduction to token engineering. We discussed complex systems, we discussed what token engineering is all about, and how the whole engineering process gets involved with token engineering. We discussed complex systems. We discussed how we take periods of time and we take multiple of these snapshots, and then we do our analysis on how the token is performing. We also discussed about abstraction hierarchy, where we discussed the pyramid on how we go from the micro level economics to the macro level economics. We created an analogy of the macro level economics with the GDP of any country. And we discussed how microeconomics is like a mini market, and then how that market expands and becomes a part of the global economy. We discussed about dynamic controls. We discussed about information and data. And lastly, we stopped our discussion talking about purpose-driven systems and how these purpose-driven systems bring about to play their role in the larger economy. We also discussed about incentives and disincentives. And we discussed how we can create the design of an economy that incentivizes the behavior of its agents and participants, and how we can create the design that disincentivizes the behavior we do not want people to do. So incentives is the designing of the market, the mechanism, designing of everything that encourages the behavior of people within that ecosystem to do a certain thing in a certain way. We discussed how it happens in Bitcoin. And disincentive is how we discourage the participants to not do things that are not beneficial to the ecosystem. And we have rules that disincentivize participants, and that gives them that disincentive when they actually do not or violate the rules of the game. So we discussed that and how it happens. So this kind of brings us to the end of part one, where the idea was mainly to give a high-level introduction of what token engineering is about, complex systems, what are the areas that impact the whole token engineering process. Now, going forward into the next session, which is part two of these discussions, the series, we are going to talk more about the principles of tokenomics and what these principles are, what are the general guidelines, I would say, or what are the principles that revolve around designing a token system. And we'll discuss each of these principles in detail. And it's going to be good learning for you to understand what these principles are and how the whole engineering process is guided by those principles. So let's gear up, let's buckle up, and let's head on to part two of our discussion around token principles. So with all of that and more in token principles.